Marcus Chen adjusted his collar one final time as the transport shuttle descended toward the sprawling complex of the Galactic Military Academy on Kepler 442b. The assignment had come through official channels, a teaching position at the most prestigious military institution in known space. After 23 years in Earth's Special Operations Command, transitioning to academia seemed like a natural progression. The pay was excellent, the location exotic, and the opportunity to share tactical knowledge with promising young officers from across the galaxy appealed to his sense of duty. The shuttle touched down with barely a whisper, anti-gravity dampeners absorbing the landing with typical alien efficiency. Marcus gathered his single duffel bag and stepped onto the polished deck of the arrival bay. The architecture was breathtaking, soaring crystalline spires that seemed to grow organically from the ground, interconnected by graceful bridges that defied human engineering principles. Everything gleamed with an inner light that made traditional illumination unnecessary. A tall, thin being with blue-gray skin and 4 arms approached him. The creature's movements were fluid, almost dance-like, and its large black eyes studied Marcus with obvious curiosity. "Professor Chen, I presume? I am Administrator Vexcali of the Strategic Studies Department. Welcome to the Academy." Marcus extended his hand in the universal greeting that had become standard across civilized space. 2 of Vexcali's arms reciprocated the gesture, while the other 2 manipulated a holographic display device. "Honored to be here, Administrator. I'm looking forward to contributing to the Academy's mission." "Indeed, your reputation precedes you. Earth's military tactics have gained considerable respect since humanity joined the Galactic Federation. We are particularly interested in your expertise regarding unconventional warfare methods." Vexcali's tone carried a weight that Marcus couldn't quite interpret. They walked through corridors lined with displays showcasing the military history of dozens of species. Marcus recognized some: the rigid formations favored by the insectoid Kreks, the aerial supremacy doctrines of the winged Silurians, the technological superiority approach of the synthetic Nexus Collective. Each display represented thousands of years of military evolution, refined through countless conflicts across the stars. "Your teaching assignment is somewhat specialized," Vexcali continued as they entered a gravity lift that carried them upward through the tower's hollow center. "The course designation is Advanced Xenocide Theory and Application, focusing specifically on human military capabilities. The students are all senior cadets from various species, preparing for command positions in their respective fleets." Something cold settled in Marcus's stomach. "Xenocide theory? That's the study of species elimination, correct?" "Precisely. The course examines the theoretical methods by which one species might effectively neutralize another in total warfare scenarios. Given humanity's recent admission to the Federation and your species' rather aggressive reputation, the High Command deemed it prudent to ensure our officers understand human military doctrine thoroughly." The lift stopped at what appeared to be faculty quarters level. Vexcali led him down another corridor, this one lined with doors bearing alien script and symbols. "Your accommodations are here. Classes begin tomorrow at the 7th bell. Your curriculum materials have been uploaded to your personal console, though I suspect you'll want to review them extensively. The subject matter is quite comprehensive." Marcus's quarters were spacious by military standards, with a large window overlooking the Academy's training grounds. In the distance, he could see formations of alien cadets moving through various exercises, some flying, others demonstrating what appeared to be energy weapon drills, still others engaged in hand-to-hand combat that looked more like an elaborate dance. After Vexcali departed, Marcus immediately activated the room's computer console and began reviewing his teaching materials. What he found made his blood run cold. The curriculum was indeed comprehensive, a detailed analysis of human military history, tactics, physiological weaknesses, psychological profiles, and strategic vulnerabilities. Every major human conflict was dissected, from ancient Earth wars to the recent colonial expansion campaigns. But it wasn't presented as academic study. The materials read like an instruction manual for genocide. The introduction, written by someone calling themselves Strategic Analyst Prime Zethmore, was particularly chilling. Humanity represents the greatest potential threat to galactic stability since the Devourer Wars. Their capacity for violence exceeds all known parameters, their adaptation rate is unprecedented, and their psychological resilience approaches the theoretical maximum. This course will prepare future military leaders to recognize, counter, and if necessary, eliminate human military forces with maximum efficiency. Marcus scrolled through tactical analyses that were both impressively researched and completely wrong. The aliens had clearly studied human warfare extensively, but they had fundamentally misunderstood what made humanity dangerous. They focused on equipment, formations, and standard doctrines, while completely missing the core elements that had carried humans through every major conflict in their history. The physiological analysis was similarly flawed. It correctly identified human physical limitations, slower than most species, weaker than many, lacking natural weapons or armor. But it failed to account for human endurance, adaptability, and the species' unique relationship with pain and fear. The psychological profile was even worse, treating humans like any other species with predictable behavioral patterns. Most concerning was the section on human elimination protocols. The materials outlined strategies for orbital bombardment, biological warfare, and systematic extermination that were both horrifying and tactically unsound. The aliens seemed to believe that humans could be defeated through overwhelming force applied according to standard military doctrine. They had no concept of asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, or the human tendency to become exponentially more dangerous when threatened with extinction. Marcus spent the night reading every document, taking careful notes on the misconceptions and gaps in understanding. By morning, he had made a decision that would either get him killed or revolutionize galactic military thinking. He would teach the course exactly as designed, but he would teach it correctly. The morning of his first class, Marcus donned the standard Academy instructor uniform, a form-fitting garment that adapted to his physiology while maintaining the institution's formal appearance standards. The fabric felt strange against his skin, some kind of smart material that regulated temperature and provided basic protection. He gathered his teaching materials and made his way to the assigned classroom. The lecture hall was larger than he had expected, with seating arranged in concentric circles that allowed every student to have an optimal view of the central presentation area. As Marcus entered, conversations in a dozen different languages ceased. 43 alien cadets, representing 17 different species, turned their attention to him with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. Marcus recognized most of the species from his briefing materials. The heavily armored Thurians sat in the back rows, their natural chitinous plates gleaming under the hall's soft lighting. Several Silurians perched on specially designed seats that accommodated their wing structures. A group of crystalline Lexarians occupied one entire section, their translucent bodies refracting the light into complex patterns. Even a few synthetic beings from the Nexus Collective were present, their optical sensors tracking his every movement with mechanical precision. "Good morning," Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustic design. "I am Professor Marcus Chen, and I will be your instructor for advanced xenocide theory and application, with specific focus on human military capabilities. Before we begin, I want to establish some ground rules." He activated the room's holographic display system, bringing up a three-dimensional map of human-controlled space. "First, everything we discuss in this classroom is theoretical. We are studying military doctrine for educational purposes, not planning actual operations. Second, I expect detailed questions and critical analysis. The material we will cover is complex, and understanding it requires active engagement." A Thurian in the third row raised one of its four arms. "Professor Chen, is it true that humans have never lost a war?" Marcus smiled. "An interesting question, Cadet." "Thurak Venmore, sir. I serve with the Thurian Deep Space Fleet." "Cadet Thurak Venmore, humans have lost many individual battles, campaigns, and even entire theaters of operation. But you raise an important point about human military psychology that we will explore extensively in this course. The human concept of losing a war is somewhat different from how other species define military defeat." He gestured to the star map, highlighting several systems. "Humans have a disturbing tendency to treat major military defeats as temporary setbacks rather than decisive conclusions. They rebuild, adapt, and return with new tactics that account for their previous failures. This pattern has held consistent throughout human military history, from their earliest recorded conflicts to their recent expansion into space." A Silurian cadet spread its wings slightly, a sign of agitation among their species. Professor, the briefing materials suggest that humans are essentially a warrior species driven by aggression. Is this assessment accurate? Marcus considered his response carefully. The materials you have been given contain both accurate observations and significant misinterpretations. Humans are indeed capable of extraordinary violence, but aggression alone does not explain their military effectiveness. We will spend considerable time examining what actually makes human military forces dangerous. He brought up a new display showing human population statistics and military organization. For example, the current human military represents less than 2% of their total population. The vast majority of humans are engaged in peaceful occupations: agriculture, manufacturing, research, arts, and civilian governance. This creates an interesting paradox that your previous instructors may not have addressed. The display shifted to show human industrial capacity and resource distribution. Humans fight differently when their civilian population is threatened versus when they are engaged in what they term police actions or limited conflicts. Understanding this distinction is crucial for anyone who might face human forces in battle. Marcus spent the remainder of the session covering basic human military organization, carefully noting where the Academy's materials were incorrect or incomplete. He explained the difference between regular forces and special operations units, outlined command structures, and provided context for human military traditions. But he was careful not to reveal too much too quickly. As the class concluded and the alien cadets filed out, Marcus noticed several small groups forming to discuss the lecture. Their conversations were animated, with gestures and vocalizations that suggested intense interest. He had successfully planted the first seeds of doubt about their preconceptions. That evening, Marcus sat in his quarters reviewing the day's session and planning the next. Tomorrow, he would begin covering actual tactical doctrine, and the real education would begin. The aliens thought they understood how to kill humans. Soon, they would learn just how wrong they were, and why that misunderstanding could prove fatal to anyone who acted on it. The second day of class brought a different energy to the lecture hall. Word had apparently spread about the human instructor who questioned established doctrine, and Marcus noticed several additional students in the back rows, junior faculty members, and even a few senior officers attending as observers. The attention was both flattering and dangerous. If his true intentions became apparent too quickly, he might find himself on the wrong end of the very weapons systems he was supposed to be teaching about. Marcus activated the holographic display system and brought up a tactical scenario that every military academy in the galaxy used as a standard exercise. It showed a human colony world with typical defensive installations, population centers, and orbital infrastructure. The scenario was labeled Operation Cleansing Wind, the theoretical elimination of a human settlement using conventional galactic military doctrine. Today we examine practical application of anti-human tactics, Marcus announced. This scenario has been used to train officers for the past 50 standard years. Cadet Vash Kiri, please outline the standard approach for neutralizing this target. A tall, graceful Etherian stood, her luminescent skin patterns shifting to indicate formal attention. Sir, standard doctrine calls for orbital bombardment of military installations, followed by biological warfare deployment to eliminate civilian populations, then ground forces to secure resources and infrastructure. Excellent recitation, Cadet. Now, can you explain the tactical reasoning behind this sequence? Orbital bombardment eliminates organized resistance. Biological warfare prevents regrouping and guerrilla activity. Ground forces mop up any remaining resistance and establish control. Vash Kiri's response was textbook perfect, delivered with the confidence of someone who had memorized the approved answer. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. A logical approach that has proven effective against 17 different species over the past 2 centuries. Now, let me show you what would actually happen if this doctrine were applied against a human colony. The holographic display shifted, running a simulation based on real-world human defensive capabilities rather than the theoretical models used in standard academy training. Marcus had spent most of the night reprogramming the scenario using classified information from his own military experience. Phase 1, Orbital Bombardment. The display showed kinetic projectiles and energy weapons targeting the colony's visible military installations. The standard doctrine assumes that destroying obvious targets will eliminate organized resistance, Observe the results. The simulation showed the targeted installations being destroyed as expected. But then secondary explosions began erupting from locations that had appeared to be civilian structures. Hidden weapon emplacements revealed themselves, launching surface-to-orbit missiles that began targeting the attacking fleet. Underground bunkers that didn't appear on any scan opened up, deploying mobile defense platforms. A murmur went through the classroom as the attacking fleet in the simulation began taking casualties. Humans have a disturbing tendency to build redundant defensive systems and hide military assets in civilian locations, Marcus explained. More importantly, they plan for the failure of their primary defenses from the moment they begin construction. Cadet Thurak Venmore raised an armored appendage. Professor, this simulation shows human defensive capabilities that exceed our intelligence estimates. Are these parameters accurate? These parameters are based on actual human colony defenses, Cadet. Your intelligence estimates are conservative because they assume humans think like other species. Marcus highlighted several sections of the colony that were still launching attacks despite being heavily damaged. Notice that the humans are not attempting to preserve their infrastructure or minimize their own casualties. They are focused entirely on inflicting maximum damage on the attacking force. The display moved to Phase 2 of the attack. Standard doctrine now calls for biological warfare deployment. The theory is that humans, being organic, will succumb to engineered pathogens just like any other carbon-based species. The simulation showed atmospheric deployment of a theoretical bioweapon designed to target human physiology. For several minutes, the simulation showed the expected results. Human population centers going dark, resistance dropping to minimal levels, defensive fire becoming sporadic and uncoordinated. The alien cadets relaxed slightly, recognizing the familiar pattern of successful biological warfare. Then everything changed. Observe Day 7 of the biological warfare phase, Marcus announced. New signals began appearing on the display, not from the original population centers, but from locations deep underground and in remote wilderness areas. Human colonies maintain sealed emergency shelters stocked for extended siege warfare. But more importantly, they have contingency plans for biological warfare that go beyond simple survival. The simulation showed human survivors emerging from hidden locations, but they weren't attempting to rebuild or surrender. Instead, they were deploying their own biological weapons, targeting the ecosystem that the attacking aliens would need to exploit the conquered colony. Crops were poisoned, water supplies were contaminated with compounds lethal to most galactic species, and the atmosphere itself was being altered to make long-term occupation impossible. Humans call this scorched earth tactics, Marcus explained to the stunned classroom. If they cannot hold territory, they ensure it has no value to whoever takes it. But this example shows a more sophisticated approach, biological warfare designed to make the planet uninhabitable specifically for the attacking species, while remaining theoretically recoverable for humans with appropriate medical technology. A Nexus Collective synthetic unit raised a mechanical appendage. Professor Chen, this level of biological warfare sophistication requires extensive preparation and resources. Surely this is an extreme case rather than standard human defensive doctrine. Marcus smiled grimly. Unit designation 77 Alpha, this is standard doctrine for human frontier colonies. Every settlement beyond Earth's primary defensive sphere is established with the understanding that it may need to be destroyed rather than captured. The colonists volunteer for this possibility as part of their settlement agreement. The implications of this statement sent another ripple of unease through the classroom. Most galactic species viewed warfare as a limited activity with clear objectives and acceptable losses. The concept of an entire population willingly choosing mutual destruction over defeat was foreign to their military thinking. Phase 3, ground assault to secure remaining assets. The simulation moved to its final stage, showing the standard doctrine for planetary occupation after orbital bombardment and biological warfare. Transport ships deployed ground forces to secure strategic locations and begin exploitation operations. What the alien cadets saw in the simulation shattered their understanding of human warfare. The surviving humans weren't hiding in bunkers waiting to surrender. They weren't attempting to negotiate terms or preserve what remained of their civilization. Instead, They had used the time during the biological warfare phase to prepare the most comprehensive guerrilla warfare campaign any of the aliens had ever seen. Every piece of remaining infrastructure was booby-trapped. Supply convoys came under attack from weapons that seemed to materialize from the landscape itself. Command posts were infiltrated and destroyed by humans who had somehow survived biological warfare, specifically designed to kill them. Most disturbing of all, the humans seemed to be learning and adapting to alien tactics in real time, becoming more effective with each engagement. The simulation projects that standard ground forces would require approximately 18 months to secure a human colony of 50,000 inhabitants, Marcus announced. Casualties among the occupying force would exceed 200%, meaning the entire invasion force would be destroyed and replaced at least twice before achieving nominal control. Cadet Vashkiri's luminescent patterns were flickering with what Marcus recognized as distress. "Professor, these casualty projections seem excessive. Surely isolated groups of human survivors could not inflict such losses on a properly equipped military force." "An excellent observation, Cadet. You are thinking like a conventional military officer from any of the established galactic species. You assume that isolated groups of human survivors would behave like isolated groups of any other species." Marcus brought up a new section of the simulation. "This assumption is the fundamental flaw in all current anti-human tactical doctrine." The display showed a detailed breakdown of human psychological and social structures during extreme stress. Unlike other species, who tended toward individual preservation or hierarchical breakdown under pressure, humans demonstrated what the simulation labeled as pack bonding intensification and collective threat response amplification. When threatened with extinction, humans do not become weaker or more desperate, Marcus explained. They become exponentially more dangerous because their social cooperation actually increases under stress. They share resources, coordinate tactics, and subordinate individual survival to group objectives to a degree that most psychologists consider theoretically impossible. The classroom was completely silent now, with even the observers in the back rows leaning forward to absorb every word. Marcus could see the implications dawning on their faces as they realized how fundamentally they had misunderstood their potential enemy. Furthermore, Marcus continued, humans have what military psychologists call asymmetric escalation response. When faced with superior force, they do not seek to match that force directly. Instead, they identify asymmetric vulnerabilities and exploit them with disproportionate effect. He highlighted several incidents in the simulation where small groups of humans had caused massive disruption to alien operations. A single human with appropriate knowledge can disable a starship. A small group can contaminate an entire planet's biosphere. A determined human population can make occupation so costly that victory becomes indistinguishable from defeat. The final portion of the simulation showed long-term occupation scenarios. In every case, the cost of maintaining control over human territory exceeded any possible benefit from that control. The humans never stopped fighting, never accepted defeat, and never failed to find new ways to inflict casualties on occupying forces. "Class dismissed," Marcus announced. "Tomorrow we will examine human offensive capabilities. I suggest you review tonight's materials carefully and prepare for scenarios significantly more complex than anything you have studied previously." As the alien cadets filed out, their conversations were subdued and worried. Marcus noticed several of them accessing personal communication devices, probably sending reports back to their respective governments about what they had learned. Good. The more the galaxy understood about human capabilities, the less likely they were to make the catastrophic mistake of actually fighting a war against humanity. That evening, Marcus received a message from Administrator Vexcali requesting a private meeting. As he made his way to the administrator's office, Marcus wondered if his curriculum modifications had been noticed. If so, he might be about to face the very scenarios he had been teaching his students to avoid. The administrator's office was a study in alien aesthetics, flowing organic curves that seemed to grow from the floor and walls, bioluminescent panels that provided soft, even lighting, and a desk that appeared to be carved from a single massive crystal. Vexcali was waiting behind the desk, with all four arms engaged in manipulating different holographic displays simultaneously. "Professor Chen, please be seated. I have been reviewing reports of your teaching methods, and I must say they are unconventional. Marcus settled into the chair that molded itself to his human physiology. I believe in practical application of theoretical knowledge, Administrator. The cadets seem to be responding well to realistic scenarios. Indeed they are. Several faculty members have commented on the intensity of classroom discussions following your lectures. The cadets are asking questions that frankly have some of our senior instructors concerned. Vexcali's tone was carefully neutral, but Marcus could detect underlying tension. What sort of questions? Questions about the fundamental assumptions underlying our military doctrine. Questions about whether our current tactics would be effective against an enemy that refuses to follow conventional patterns of warfare. Questions about whether the Academy has been preparing them to fight the wars of the past rather than the conflicts they may actually face. Marcus chose his words carefully. Education should challenge assumptions, Administrator. If the cadets are thinking critically about tactical doctrine, then the course is serving its purpose. Vexcali was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus with those large black eyes. Professor Chen, I am going to ask you a direct question, and I would appreciate an honest answer. Are you teaching these cadets how to defeat humans, or are you teaching them why they should never try? The question hung in the air between them. Marcus realized that his true intentions had been more transparent than he had hoped. Vexcali was clearly more perceptive than most military administrators. I am teaching them to understand humans, Marcus replied finally. Whether that understanding leads them to attack or avoid conflict is a decision they will have to make for themselves. I see. Vexcali deactivated the holographic displays and leaned back in his chair. Continue with your current curriculum, Professor, but be aware that some very important people are taking notice of what you are teaching. The implications of your lessons extend far beyond academic exercise. As Marcus walked back to his quarters, he reflected on the administrator's warning. The galaxy was indeed taking notice of what his students were learning. The question now was whether that attention would lead to greater understanding or to the kind of preemptive action that could ignite the very war he was trying to prevent. The third week of classes brought an unexpected announcement. Marcus arrived at his usual lecture hall to find it empty except for a message drone hovering in the center of the room. The device projected a hologram of Administrator Vexcali as Marcus approached. Professor Chen, today's session will be conducted in Training Complex 7. Your students are waiting, along with several observers from the High Command. Today marks the practical examination phase of your course. The message dissolved, leaving Marcus alone with a growing sense of unease. Practical examination meant live exercises, and he had a disturbing suspicion about what form those exercises might take. He gathered his materials and made his way through the Academy's sprawling complex toward the training facilities. Training Complex 7 was one of the Academy's most sophisticated simulation centers, capable of creating fully immersive combat scenarios with real physical feedback. As Marcus approached the entrance, he could hear the sounds of activity within: weapons fire, shouting in multiple languages, and the distinctive whine of military equipment under stress. The observation deck overlooked a vast chamber that had been configured to resemble a human frontier settlement. Every detail was perfect, from the modular construction techniques favored by human colonists to the defensive positions that Marcus recognized from actual military installations. In the center of the complex, a group of figures in civilian clothing moved between buildings with the careful coordination of trained combatants. Professor Chen, welcome to the practical phase of your curriculum. The voice belonged to Admiral Korthves, a high-ranking Thurian officer whose reputation for tactical brilliance was known throughout the galaxy. Your students have been preparing for this exercise based on the theoretical knowledge you have provided. Today, we observe the application of that knowledge in a realistic scenario. Marcus scanned the observation deck and felt his heart sink. Representatives from 17 different species were present, including several wearing the insignia of Fleet Command. This wasn't just an academic exercise, it was a demonstration for the galaxy's military leadership. Below in the training chamber, Marcus could see his alien students moving into position around the simulated human settlement. They had divided into specialist teams according to their species' natural advantages. The Silurians held aerial superiority positions, their wings allowing them to attack from angles that ground-based defenses couldn't easily counter. The heavily armored Thurians formed the main assault force, equipped with weapons capable of breaching the strongest fortifications. The Nexus collective units provided electronic warfare support, ready to disable any technological defenses. The scenario is straightforward, Admiral Korthves continued. A human colony has declared independence from the Galactic Federation and is harboring fugitive war criminals. Your students must neutralize the settlement and capture specific high-value targets alive for interrogation. They have been given 1 hour to complete the mission using the tactical knowledge you have provided. Marcus watched as his students began their attack with textbook precision. The Silurians struck first, attempting to eliminate the settlement's communication arrays and air defense systems. Their approach was flawless according to standard galactic doctrine, high-speed passes that minimized exposure to defensive fire while maximizing damage to critical infrastructure. The simulated humans responded exactly as Marcus had taught his students to expect. Hidden defensive positions revealed themselves, launching surface-to-air missiles and energy weapons that forced the Silurians to break off their attack runs. Several of the flying aliens took simulated damage and withdrew to rally points outside the engagement zone. "Interesting," murmured Commander Zeth Kai, the Etherian intelligence officer who had written much of the original curriculum. "The human defenses are responding as predicted, but the Silurians are taking heavier casualties than expected." Marcus said nothing, but he knew what was coming. His students were about to learn the difference between theoretical knowledge and practical application in the most brutal way possible. The Thurian assault teams moved forward under covering fire from their support units. Their approach was methodical and professional, using terrain features and suppressive fire to advance on the settlement's perimeter. The humans appeared to be falling back according to standard defensive doctrine, abandoning outer positions to consolidate around more defensible locations. Then the trap was sprung. The ground beneath the advancing Thurians erupted as concealed charges detonated. The explosions weren't just destructive. They were precisely calculated to channel the surviving attackers into predetermined kill zones where interlocking fields of fire awaited them. The Thurians' heavy armor, which provided excellent protection against conventional weapons, became a liability as the explosions disabled their mobility systems and left them vulnerable to follow-up attacks. "How are the simulated humans coordinating this level of defensive response?" demanded General Thexmori, a Krex officer whose insectoid features twitched with agitation. "Our intelligence indicated that human settlements this size lack sophisticated command and control systems." "They do," Marcus replied quietly. "Human tactical coordination doesn't depend on centralized command structures the way other species' military forces do. Each individual defender is capable of independent tactical decision-making while maintaining overall strategic coordination." On the training floor, the situation was deteriorating rapidly for the alien students. The Nexus collective units had succeeded in disabling some of the settlement's electronic systems, but instead of crippling the human defense, this seemed to have triggered backup systems that were even more effective. Weapons that had appeared to be simple kinetic projectile launchers revealed themselves to be sophisticated multi-mode systems capable of engaging targets at every level from ground assault to orbital bombardment. The simulated humans weren't just defending their settlement, they were actively hunting the attacking force. Small teams of human fighters had somehow moved outside the perimeter and were conducting hit-and-run attacks on the aliens' rear positions. Supply lines were being severed, communication relays were being destroyed, and isolated alien units were being systematically eliminated. "This is impossible," declared Admiral Korthves, his 4 arms gesturing emphatically at the tactical display. "The humans are outnumbered 4-1 and outgunned by orders of magnitude. How are they maintaining offensive operations while under direct assault?" Marcus activated his teaching interface and brought up detailed analysis of the engagement. "The humans are not trying to win a conventional military victory, Admiral. They are implementing what they call total war doctrine. Every civilian is a combatant, every building is a weapons platform, and every tactical retreat is preparation for a counterattack." The display showed movement patterns that none of the alien observers had noticed. The human civilians who had appeared to be fleeing were actually repositioning to create new defensive positions. The buildings that had been abandoned were revealing themselves to be automated weapons platforms. Most disturbing of all, the humans who had been killed by alien fire were getting back up and resuming combat operations. "The simulation parameters are incorrect," protested Commander Zethkai. "Dead combatants cannot continue fighting." "These combatants aren't dead, Commander. They are wounded but functional. Humans have an unusual physiological capability to continue combat operations despite injuries that would incapacitate most other species." Marcus highlighted several figures on the display who were moving and fighting despite having sustained what should have been fatal damage. Furthermore, human tactical doctrine includes provisions for combat effectiveness under extreme duress. A human who knows they are dying will often focus entirely on inflicting maximum damage on enemy forces rather than seeking medical attention or attempting to survive. As if to illustrate his point, one of the simulated humans who had been shot multiple times dragged themselves toward a group of alien students and detonated an explosive device that eliminated an entire Thurian fire team. The explosion was suicide, but it achieved a tactical objective that changed the entire balance of the engagement. The alien students were beginning to panic. Their carefully planned assault had turned into a nightmare of asymmetric warfare that their training had not prepared them for. The Silurians were grounded by surface-to-air fire that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The Thurians were bogged down in urban combat, where their advantages in armor and firepower meant nothing. The Nexus collective units were being systematically hunted by humans who seemed to appear and disappear at will. "How long has the engagement been running?" asked Admiral Korthves. 47 minutes, Admiral. The mission parameters called for completion within 1 hour. "And the current status?" Marcus consulted his tactical display. "The alien students have suffered 68% casualties and have failed to capture any of their primary objectives. The human defenders have sustained 32% casualties, but retain full tactical mobility and have successfully eliminated most of the attacking force's heavy equipment." Silence fell over the observation deck as the implications became clear. The most promising military students from 17 different species, equipped with superior technology and overwhelming numerical superiority, were being defeated by a simulated human settlement using tactics that violated every principle of conventional warfare. "Terminate the exercise," ordered Admiral Korthves. The simulation chamber began powering down, leaving the alien students standing among the wreckage of their failed assault. Many of them appeared to be in shock, staring at tactical displays that showed the complete collapse of everything they had been taught about military science. "Professor Chen," the Admiral continued, "I believe some explanation is required. How is this level of human combat effectiveness possible? Our intelligence services have analyzed human military capabilities extensively, and nothing in their reports suggested this degree of tactical sophistication." Marcus looked around at the assembled alien officers and made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. "Admiral, with respect, your intelligence services have fundamentally misunderstood what makes humans dangerous. You have been studying our military technology, our command structures, and our strategic doctrines, but you have ignored the most important factor in human warfare. Which is, we are not fighting to win military victories, Admiral. We are fighting to survive. Every human understands that in a war between species, defeat means extinction. That understanding changes everything about how we approach combat." The alien officers exchanged glances that Marcus couldn't interpret, but their body language suggested deep concern. "Professor," said Commander Zethkai carefully, "are you saying that standard military doctrine is ineffective against human forces?" "I am saying that any species that attacks humanity had better be prepared to commit genocide, Commander. Because anything less than complete extermination will result in a war of attrition that will last for generations and destroy both civilizations." The observation deck fell silent again as the implications of this statement sank in. These officers had been preparing for a conventional military conflict against an unconventional enemy. They were beginning to realize that such a conflict might be unwinnable by any acceptable definition of victory. "Class dismissed," Marcus announced. "Tomorrow we will analyze this engagement in detail and discuss why every principle of galactic military doctrine proved ineffective against human defensive tactics." As the alien students filed out of the training complex, their conversations were subdued and worried. They had just experienced firsthand the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical reality. More importantly, they had learned that some enemies were too dangerous to fight, no matter how strong you believed yourself to be. Marcus remained on the observation deck as the alien officers departed, each lost in their own thoughts about what they had witnessed. Tomorrow, he would begin teaching them about human offensive capabilities. After today's demonstration, he suspected they would be much more attentive students. Marcus arrived at his lecture hall the following morning to find it packed beyond capacity. Word of the previous day's training exercise had spread throughout the academy, and every available seat was occupied by cadets, faculty members, and visiting officers. Additional observers stood along the walls, and Marcus could see remote viewing feeds being transmitted to locations throughout the galactic communications network. Administrator Vexcali was waiting at the podium with what Marcus had learned to recognize as barely contained anxiety. "Professor Chen, before you begin today's session, I must inform you that this lecture is being broadcast live to military command centers across known space. The High Command has classified your course materials as essential strategic intelligence." Marcus activated his holographic display system and brought up a detailed analysis of the previous day's exercise. The tactical breakdown showed the alien students' assault plan overlaid with the actual results, a stark comparison that highlighted every failed assumption and tactical error. "Yesterday, you witnessed the practical application of theoretical knowledge about human defensive capabilities," Marcus began. "Today, we will analyze why your assault failed and what those failures reveal about the fundamental differences between human warfare and conventional galactic military doctrine." He highlighted the opening phase of the exercise, where the Solarian air units had attacked the settlement's visible defensive installations. "Cadet Vash Kiri, please explain the tactical reasoning behind the initial airstrikes." The Etherians' luminescent patterns were dim with embarrassment. "Sir, we targeted communication arrays and air defense systems to eliminate organized resistance and establish air superiority. A textbook approach that has proven effective in thousands of military operations across the galaxy," Marcus acknowledged. "However, observe the actual results." The display showed the Solarians' attack runs being met with defensive fire from positions that hadn't appeared on any reconnaissance scan. The fundamental error was assuming that human defensive systems would be organized according to conventional military principles. You targeted command and control infrastructure because most species centralize their military coordination. Humans do not. Marcus brought up a comparison showing typical alien military organization versus human tactical structure. Most galactic species organize their forces hierarchically, eliminate the command structure, and the entire force becomes ineffective. Human military organization is distributed and redundant. Every individual unit is capable of independent operation while maintaining overall tactical coordination. A Thurian cadet raised an armored appendage. "Professor, how is tactical coordination possible without centralized command? Our military theory states that distributed command structures are inherently inefficient and vulnerable to exploitation." "An excellent question, Cadet Thurak Venmore. Your military theory is correct for most species, but it fails to account for human social psychology." Marcus activated a new section of his presentation showing human military training methodologies. Humans train their military personnel to internalize strategic objectives rather than simply follow orders. Each individual soldier understands not only what they are supposed to do, but why they are doing it and how their actions contribute to overall mission success. This allows them to adapt to changing circumstances without waiting for new orders from higher authority. The implications of this statement sent a ripple of unease through the assembled aliens. Most galactic military forces relied on clear command hierarchies precisely because few species were psychologically capable of the kind of independent tactical thinking Marcus was describing. "More importantly," Marcus continued, "humans train extensively in what they call mission-type tactics. Rather than receiving detailed instructions about how to accomplish an objective, human units are given a desired outcome and expected to determine the best method for achieving it based on local conditions." He displayed footage from the previous day's exercise showing human defenders adapting their tactics in real time as the alien assault developed. Notice how the human defensive response changed throughout the engagement. They were not following a predetermined plan. They were continuously analyzing the threat and modifying their tactics to counter each new development. Commander Zethkai leaned forward in the observer section. Professor Chen, this level of tactical flexibility suggests individual human soldiers possess strategic thinking capabilities typically associated with senior officers. How is this possible? Marcus smiled grimly. Commander, you are beginning to understand why conventional military doctrine fails against human forces. Every human soldier is trained to think like an officer because human military philosophy assumes that the command structure will be destroyed early in any serious conflict. The display shifted to show human military education systems, with emphasis on tactical decision-making training that began in basic military education and continued throughout a soldier's career. Humans assume that warfare will be chaotic, communications will be disrupted, and individual units will be forced to operate independently for extended periods. They prepare for these conditions from the beginning. This brings us to the second major error in yesterday's assault, Marcus continued. The display showed the point where the Thurian ground forces had advanced into what appeared to be abandoned positions. Cadet Thurak Venmore, why did your assault teams move forward when the humans appeared to be retreating? The heavily armored alien shifted uncomfortably. Standard doctrine calls for immediate exploitation of enemy withdrawal to prevent reorganization of defensive positions. Again, a tactically sound principle that works against conventional opponents. However, humans have weaponized the concept of tactical withdrawal. The display showed how the human retreat had actually been a carefully orchestrated repositioning that drew the alien forces into predetermined killing zones. The humans were not retreating because they were being defeated. They were advancing the battlefield to more favorable terrain. Every step backward was calculated to place your forces in a position where they would be more vulnerable to counterattack. Marcus highlighted the moment when concealed explosives had disabled the Thurian assault teams. Furthermore, the humans had prepared the battlefield in advance, assuming that any defensive position would eventually be overrun. Rather than trying to hold ground indefinitely, they created conditions where losing ground would be catastrophically expensive for the attacking force. Admiral Korthves spoke from the observer section. Professor, you are describing defensive tactics that require sacrificing one's own forces and infrastructure to inflict casualties on an enemy. Most species would consider such tactics to be evidence of military incompetence rather than strategic sophistication. With respect, Admiral, that attitude represents the third critical error in understanding human warfare. You are judging human tactics by the standards of limited warfare between civilized species. Humans do not fight limited wars when their survival is at stake. Marcus activated a new display showing human civilian involvement in the previous day's exercise. Every adult human in that settlement was a combatant. The civilians, who appeared to be fleeing, were actually repositioning to create new defensive positions. The non-combatants, who seemed to be hiding, were actually operating concealed weapon systems. But this violates the fundamental principles of civilized warfare, protested General Thexmori. Military forces should be distinguishable from civilian populations. Combat should be confined to designated combatants. General, humans have studied galactic military law extensively. They understand the principles of limited warfare, and they follow those principles when engaged in conflicts with limited objectives. Marcus paused to let this statement sink in before continuing. However, when humans believe their species' survival is threatened, they abandon all restrictions on warfare methods. The silence in the lecture hall was absolute as the implications became clear. You are saying that humans would resort to total war tactics in any conflict they perceived as existential. I am saying that humans have no concept of acceptable defeat when their survival is at stake, General. They will use any method, accept any casualty level, and sacrifice any resource to avoid extinction. Marcus brought up historical examples from human military history, carefully edited to remove specific identifying information, but highlighting the pattern of escalation that characterized human conflicts. Throughout their history, humans have demonstrated a consistent pattern. The greater the threat to their survival, the more extreme their response. They have fought wars that lasted for generations. accepted casualty rates that would destroy other species, and developed weapons systems that rendered entire regions uninhabitable. The exercise yesterday represented human defensive capabilities under relatively favorable conditions. You were attacking a single settlement with conventional forces while following galactic military law. Now, I want you to consider what human defensive capabilities would look like if they believed their entire species was threatened with extinction. The display shifted to show theoretical models of human industrial capacity converted to military production. The numbers were staggering. If humans committed their entire civilization to warfare, they could produce military equipment at rates that would overwhelm any conceivable galactic alliance. But this level of militarization would require abandoning all civilian economic activity, observed Commander Zethkai. No civilization can sustain total war production for extended periods. No other civilization can sustain it, Commander. Humans can, because they have a psychological capability that appears to be unique among sentient species. Marcus displayed comparative studies of stress response in various galactic species. When faced with existential threats, most species experience psychological breakdown, social collapse, and reduced cognitive function. Humans experience the opposite. The data showed human performance metrics under extreme stress conditions. Humans become more cooperative, more focused, and more effective as the level of threat increases. Their social cohesion actually strengthens under pressure that would shatter other civilizations. You are describing a species that becomes more dangerous the more threatened they feel, Admiral Korthves observed. Precisely, Admiral, and that brings us to the most important lesson of yesterday's exercise. Marcus turned to face the assembled observers directly. Every tactical advantage you possess over humans, superior technology, greater numbers, better resources, becomes meaningless if you cannot achieve rapid and complete victory. Because the longer a conflict lasts, the more dangerous humans become. They learn from every engagement, adapt to every tactic, and develop counters to every advantage their enemies possess. More importantly, they share this knowledge across their entire species through communication networks that are designed to survive the complete destruction of their command structure. The display showed projections of extended conflict scenarios between human forces and various galactic military organizations. In every case, the mathematical models showed human capabilities increasing over time, while their opponents' effectiveness remained static or declined. This is why yesterday's exercise failed so completely, Marcus concluded. You were not fighting to defeat humans. You were providing them with intelligence about your capabilities while giving them practice in countering your tactics. Every minute the battle continued made them more effective and made you more predictable. The lecture hall remained silent as Marcus deactivated his display system. The alien students and observers were processing information that challenged everything they had been taught about military science and strategic planning. For tomorrow's session, I want you to consider this question. Given what you now know about human warfare capabilities, under what circumstances would it be strategically advisable to engage in military conflict with humanity? As the assembled aliens filed out of the hall, their conversations were subdued and worried. Marcus remained at the podium, knowing that the answer to his question was becoming increasingly clear to everyone who had attended his lectures. There were no circumstances under which engaging in military conflict with humanity would be strategically advisable. The only winning move was not to play the game at all. But Marcus suspected that some of the galaxy's military leaders would need more convincing before they reached that conclusion. Tomorrow, he would show them why they were correct to be concerned, and why their concern was probably inadequate to the actual threat humanity represented. The lecture hall was standing room only when Marcus arrived for what would be his final session. Representatives from every major galactic government were present, along with military leaders whose decisions could shape the future of interstellar politics. The atmosphere was tense with the weight of revelations that had shaken the foundation of galactic military doctrine. Administrator Vexcali met Marcus at the entrance, all four arms displaying gestures of extreme agitation. Professor Chen, I must inform you that several governments have filed formal protests regarding your curriculum. They claim your lectures constitute strategic intelligence sharing that violates Academy neutrality protocols. Marcus nodded calmly. And what is the Academy's position on these protests, Administrator? The High Command has reviewed your materials and concluded that they represent legitimate academic instruction rather than intelligence sharing. However, they have also concluded that your true identity should be disclosed to avoid any appearance of deception. Marcus felt his stomach clench. My true identity. Colonel Marcus Chen, Earth Special Operations Command, currently on extended assignment to the Galactic Military Academy under the Cultural Exchange Program. Your military record indicates extensive experience in asymmetric warfare, counterinsurgency operations, and strategic planning for extended conflict scenarios. The revelation sent a ripple of reaction through the assembled aliens who had overheard. Marcus realized that his careful masquerade as a civilian academic had just been blown apart by administrative thoroughness. Now he would have to face the consequences of teaching aliens how to fight humans while being a human himself. I see, Marcus said quietly. And how do the students and faculty feel about having been taught by the enemy they were supposed to be learning to defeat? That, Colonel Chen, is precisely what today's session needs to address. Marcus walked to the podium with the measured pace of a soldier approaching a battlefield. The assembled aliens watched him with a mixture of respect, fear, and fascination. He had spent weeks teaching them why humans were dangerous, and now they were faced with the reality that they had been learning from a human all along. Good morning, Marcus began, his voice carrying easily through the packed hall. I understand that my true identity has been revealed, which provides an appropriate context for today's final lesson. You have been learning about human warfare capabilities from someone who has spent his entire adult life perfecting those capabilities. He activated the holographic display system and brought up a comprehensive analysis of everything his students had learned over the past month. Today, we will examine what your governments can expect if they choose to act on the tactical knowledge you have gained. But first, I want to address the obvious question that many of you are thinking. Was I teaching you how to kill humans, or was I teaching you why you should never try? Marcus paused, looking out over the sea of alien faces that represented dozens of different species and military traditions. The answer is both. Everything I have taught you about human capabilities is accurate. The tactics I have described will work exactly as I have explained. The defensive capabilities you witnessed in our practical exercise represent actual human military doctrine. However, I have also demonstrated why possessing this knowledge does not provide any meaningful advantage in a conflict with humanity. The display showed a strategic overview of human-controlled space, with detailed breakdowns of military infrastructure, population distribution, and resource allocation. Your intelligence services have provided remarkably accurate information about human military capabilities. What they have failed to analyze correctly is what those capabilities mean in the context of actual warfare. Marcus highlighted specific installations and fleet deployments. The human military forces you have been studying represent approximately 15% of actual human military capability. The remaining 85% consists of reserve forces, militia organizations, civilian defense groups, and industrial capacity that can be converted to military production within standard months. A murmur went through the assembled aliens as they realized the implications. You are saying that human military strength is 5 times greater than our intelligence estimates? Asked Admiral Korthves. I am saying that human military strength is essentially unlimited, Admiral. Every human colony, every industrial facility, every civilian population center is a potential military asset. More importantly, every human civilian is a potential combatant with basic military training. Marcus brought up comparative data showing military participation rates across various galactic species. Most civilizations maintain military forces representing 1 to 3% of their total population. Human military doctrine assumes that 100% of the population will participate in warfare if their species' survival is threatened. But surely this is theoretical rather than practical capability, protested General Thex Mori. No civilization can actually convert its entire population to military service. General, humans have done exactly that multiple times in their history. During what they call their world wars, entire human civilizations converted to military production and total warfare. Civilian populations accepted rationing, industrial conversion, and massive casualty rates because they understood that defeat meant extinction. The display showed historical examples carefully edited to remove specific identifying details, while highlighting the scale of mobilization humans were capable of achieving. In one conflict lasting 6 standard years, humans produced over 300,000 aircraft, 60,000 armored vehicles, and 40 million individual weapons while maintaining agricultural production sufficient to feed their entire population and allied forces. This level of production was achieved using primitive industrial technology that was centuries behind current galactic standards. Modern human industrial capacity, if converted entirely to military production, could theoretically outfit every human in the galaxy with equipment superior to anything currently deployed by galactic military forces. Commander Zeth Kai leaned forward in alarm. Colonel Chen, you are describing capabilities that would represent a threat to the entire galactic order. Surely human leaders understand the destabilizing effect of possessing such military potential. Commander, human leaders understand exactly how dangerous they are. That understanding shapes every aspect of human foreign policy. Marcus brought up diplomatic records showing human interaction with galactic governments since joining the Federation. Notice the pattern in human diplomatic behavior. They consistently seek peaceful resolution of conflicts, offer extensive economic cooperation, and avoid any action that could be interpreted as militarily threatening. This is not because humans are naturally peaceful. It is because they understand that any military conflict with galactic governments could escalate beyond anyone's ability to control. You are suggesting that humans are deliberately restraining their military capabilities to avoid frightening other species, asked Administrator Vexcali. I am stating that humans are deliberately restraining their military capabilities because they recognize that unrestricted human warfare would be incompatible with galactic civilization. The humans you have met, traded with, and worked alongside are the same species that developed strategic weapons capable of sterilizing entire planets. They choose not to build or deploy such weapons because they understand the consequences. The silence in the lecture hall was profound as the implications became clear. The aliens had been viewing humanity as a potentially dangerous new member of galactic civilization. They were beginning to realize that humanity was more dangerous than any civilization in galactic history and was choosing to conceal that danger for the benefit of everyone else. This brings us to the final lesson of this course, Marcus continued. Everything you have learned about defeating human forces becomes irrelevant the moment humans decide that their restraint is no longer serving their interests. The tactics you studied are effective against humans who are following galactic military law and trying to minimize civilian casualties. They will not work against humans who believe their species' survival is at stake and have abandoned all restrictions on warfare methods. Marcus activated a final display showing theoretical projections of unrestricted human warfare. The models were terrifying, cascading scenarios of industrial mobilization, technological development, and strategic planning that would transform humanity from a galactic neighbor into an existential threat to every other species in known space. The human military forces you have been studying represent what humans call police action capability. It is designed for limited conflicts with specific political objectives. Actual human warfare capability is classified at levels that require authorization from Earth's planetary government to access. Colonel Chen, Admiral Korthves said carefully, are you telling us that humanity has been concealing the true extent of their military capabilities since joining the Federation? Admiral, humanity has been concealing military capabilities that would cause every other galactic government to unite in a preemptive war if they understood what humans were actually capable of building and deploying. Marcus deactivated the display system and faced his audience directly. The question you must answer is not how to defeat humanity in military conflict. The question is how to ensure that such a conflict never becomes necessary. Everything you have learned in this course represents humanity with the safety locks engaged. You have seen what humans are capable of when they are trying not to hurt anyone. I strongly advise against discovering what they are capable of when they stop trying. The lecture hall erupted in conversations as alien officers and government representatives absorbed the implications of this revelation. Marcus remained at the podium. watching as the galaxy's military leadership grappled with the realization that they had been preparing to fight a war they could never win against an enemy that was actively trying to avoid fighting them. Administrator Vexcali approached the podium as the crowd began to disperse. "Colonel Chen, I believe your course has achieved its intended purpose. The High Command has already begun revising military doctrine based on your lessons." "And what conclusions have they reached, Administrator?" "That military conflict with humanity should be avoided at all costs, and that galactic security depends on ensuring that humans never have reason to question their decision to restrain their military capabilities." Marcus nodded. "Then the course has been successful. The most important tactical knowledge I could share was not how to fight humans. It was why fighting humans would be the last mistake anyone would ever make." As Marcus gathered his materials and prepared to leave the academy, he reflected on the weeks of instruction that had just concluded. He had been sent to teach aliens how to kill humans, and had instead taught them why they should never try. The galaxy was safer now, not because its military forces had learned how to defeat humanity, but because they had learned to fear what would happen if they tried. Sometimes the most important victory was the war that never had to be fought. Marcus had just ensured that the galaxy would continue to know peace, not through strength of arms, but through understanding of what war would actually cost. The aliens had wanted to learn about human killing techniques. Instead, they had learned about human restraint, and why that restraint was the most dangerous weapon humanity possessed. As long as other species understood the cost of breaking that restraint, peace would be maintained through the simple understanding that some enemies were too dangerous to fight. Marcus smiled as he walked through the Academy's corridors one final time. Mission accomplished, though not in the way anyone had expected when the course began. The galaxy's military officers would return to their fleets with new knowledge, not how to defeat humans, but how to ensure they never had to try.